Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase, pricing, and availability questions regarding this watch. Today, we're discussing a model with a long lineage. What you see here debuted back in 2021, but I would argue that its roots go all the way back to the 1970s. This is the Patek Philippe Calatrava 6119G-001 in white gold. It's the heir to the 2006 5119, and prior to that, the 1985 3919, and I would go one better and even say the 1973 3520 with its Hobnail Calatrava style informs the design of this watch. So this is a long and successful lineage at Patek Philippe, one of its greatest and longest running model lines, even longer than the Nautilus if you think about it. So taking a quick look, it is white gold or gray gold, more on that in a moment, 39 millimeters in diameter, nice and svelte at 8.4 millimeters thick. It's 46.9 from lug to lug, with a 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now, of course, this watch succeeded the 5119 as the Hobnail Bezel Calatrava. And so you can see on my wrist, it's a larger watch, but it's also slightly more graceful, as the 5119 had rather strong, thrusting, stepped out lug profiles, and these are blended nicely with the case band for a little bit more of a fluid look, and I really enjoy that. Now, it's not a small watch, not by any means. It's 47 lug to lug, so I'd recommend this for a wrist of 15 centimeters circumference, maybe 14 if your wrist is more flat across the top than round. You can see it'll easily slide underneath the dress cuff. This angle always exaggerates the width of the watch. Always go by the down the barrel if you're trying to gauge whether the lugs are over the edge of your wrist. Strap's high grade. You can see large rectangular scale, symmetrical scale, alligator, very high grade cut of the animal, always. Gloss, monotone stitch. It actually has a folded edge, not a lacquered and cut edge. On the bottom, calf skin, you can see a brand new Patek Philippe factory strap. It is in outstanding condition, and it's got the company's recently featured pull-tab spring bars, so you can pop the strap right off without need for a tool. We have a small white gold, faceted, polished, spade-style Patek pin buckle right there, and then the case. Gray gold. I mentioned it earlier. It is a white gold that's white all the way through, so it's not rhodium plated like cheap traditional white gold. And if it does get scratched, it's the same color underneath. Now you can see how these lugs are blended in. They don't stick out like, well, sticks from the case band. If you look at something like a 3919 or a 3520 before that, you'll notice even as late as the 5116, the lugs are not blended into the case band. They thrust out of the case flank, and while there is an art and a craft to making a case like that, this is just a little bit more organic, fluid. I think it's easier on the eyes. Now, of course, this is one of the no-guard Calatravas, but we have little Calatrava cross, the symbol of the brand right there. We have a twin row clou de Paris, and these are little pyramid-shaped facets that give the dial quite a degree of complexity. You can also see that there's a little gadroon adjacent to the crystal that visibly separates the bezel from this dramatically boxed and cambered sapphire. Now, on the dial, we have both faceted white gold indices and little white gold cabochon outboard of those. So the dial is fairly ornate, but it's also got a cool grayscale simplicity to it. The faceting of the indices makes them contrast better against the dial, as does the faceting of the hands, which you can see to good effect at center. Now the watch has a vertical sort of curtain of anthracite gray. It's not silver, it's darker than that. It's got a distinct vertical brushed pattern with a chemin de fer, or a railroad track outboard for reading individual minutes. And then we have a small seconds with a polished chaptering and an ajourage, or concentric pattern. This is an all-new Patek movement for dress watches, so a manual wind that has a hacking seconds function. I know, other brands have had this for a long time, but it's still news at Patek. Now the watch is 30 meters water resistant, and we're going to flip it all over so you can see the movement inside. When I talk about a new generation movement, I mean this is a much bigger caliber, and it better fills the case back. For a long time, Patek used the 215 manual wind on its manual wind and Hobnail bezel Calatravas, and frankly, a bigger movement was due. So here we have the caliber. You ready for this? It's got a name. So this is the 3255. It is a larger movement with twin barrels, manually wound up to 65 hours of power reserve. And you can see with the twin barrels, it provides nice even torque so that it has a flat torque curve from max wind to minimum wind, so it doesn't gain a whole lot when fully wound, nor does it start losing a lot after, for example, 26 or 36 hours. It is a 27-jewel movement that has a free-sprung Gyromax style balance beaten away at 4 Hertz, and it has the latest Spiromax silicone hairspring, which has 3 advantages. 1, highly anti-magnetic. 2, almost completely immune to temperature shifts, so timing won't vary as temperature does. And finally, the deep reactive ion etching that profiles this hairspring is now so precise that a flat hairspring, which is thin, can be made to breathe concentrically like an overcoil hairspring, which is potentially a better timekeeper. So you get the best of both right here. You can see Gyromax here adjusted in 6 position, one more than a standard chronometer. But Gyromax uses little variable inertia eccentric masses on the rim. They're adjusted in pairs to change the polar moment or turning force to adjust the timing. So not only does it allow for very precise adjustment of timing, but also greater shock tolerance. Not that a dress watch necessarily needs that, but it's nice to know it's there. And you can see the bridges are nicely cut. We have a number of finishing elements that I want to shout out. The stripes are nicely, well, they're laid down so that they have a shading gradient. See how one side of the stripe is a little bit darker and one side is a little bit lighter? That means that you're looking at the good stuff. This was done with a pass of an abrasive wheel of some kind rather than stamped on there. You can also see that the bevels are to a very high grade. Now, we don't have super sharp interior angles. If we did, I would have liked to have seen them on the balance cock, maybe on some of these adjacent train bridges. But what we do have are outward points where bevels meet at a peaked tip. And so this little center bridge right here is a particularly impressive outward pointed bevel. And you'll find more, particularly at the edge of the bridges where they flank the case. And so this little pointed bevel, that's not easy to do either. So while we don't have interior angles, we do have the next best thing here. And I like to see that. That tells me that, for example, unlike Audemars Piguet or F. Piguet, a lot of secondary time is spent after a machine cuts and bevels these bridges to give them a truly rounded mirrored profile to finish them off with the human touch. Now you can see the wheels are all satinated and the screw heads are all black polished with chamfered slots and circumference. And though it's not super easy to see, there is actually solarization on the barrel covers. We also have beveling within all of the jewel sinks, a partridge eye treatment that I really like to see. So engine turning or pegwood perlage on the base plate, it's a good-looking movement, really. It lacks for nothing. It has size, it has beauty. With a 65-hour power reserve, twin barrels, silicone hairspring, free-sprung architecture, 6-position adjustment, it is technically accomplished. It is a fantastic successor to the 3520, the 3919, and the 5116. Long may its line live. Maybe even on your wrist. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.